years stage and the second day of GEO week. We'll be having a number of presentations today, and we'll try our best to keep to time if we can. So without further ado, from Minds Parties Tech, I'd like to introduce Pascal to come up and begin his talk.
Thank you, Jack, for the introduction. So we are going to discuss about co-design and how co-design could be a useful method to deal with application of Earth observation data. Where are we speaking from? My colleague and I, Raphaël Barbier and myself, we are not familiar with EO community, but we deal a lot on design theory and methods. So we have a chair sponsored by a lot of industrial partners, and we discuss on what does it mean to design and what are the engineering methods to increase the quality of designing. We organize in particular the Design Theory SIG, Special Interest Group, that is regularly meeting. Oh, sorry, I'm not used with this tool, but it's coming. Yeah, exactly. We organize the Design Theory Special Interest Group, and there is a large community working on improving design theory methods, design theory derived methods. There is a strong renewal in design methods today to address new needs in innovation, needs related to new technologies. When it comes to Earth observation data, what is interesting is that now for a couple of years, we are going beyond the myths of data mining, just because in a way, the true issue is that everybody speaks of data as an ore, but immediately the question is an ore for doing what, and exactly how to refine the ore to do something. So finally, this analogy is really misleading, and the true point is really to design something based on data, and it's not enough to make data available to the largest possible audience, okay? So the point is really, what does it mean to co-design with data to finally get a relevant service for society? How we'll organize this ID stage. On a first part, I will insist on the EO-specific co-design issues. There are methods of co-design. I will shortly go through them, but they are not exactly adapted to Earth observation data specificities, and we have to underline this. Then, based on this, we explain what could be an EO-specific method, and I will give a brief illustration of this. In the E-Shape case, E-Shape being a very important project funded by European Commission in the H2020 framework, where we have 27 pilots providing Earth observation data and developing services with users. So specificities. Co-design in literature is quite important. Just to give you a brief overview, this is a notion that is born in so-called cyber-physical systems, and initially the problem was to integrate hardware and software in mobile systems. But step by step, it was seen finally as a quite easy method to have user involvement in the design process. And we can conclude from this short overview that we have co-design situation where there is a need for strong design with heterogeneous stakeholders and a strong relationship, and the relationship between stakeholders has to be reinvented or invented. And in particular, for this type of methods, we know now the co-design methods are more focused on specific situations where you co-design with end user. They really use the service lively. And second, we try to pool the design process by end user requirements, okay? Now, if we go to Earth observation data, how does it work? Well, the first thing that is very striking in Earth observation data is there is a quite a long distance between the value for end user and the Earth observation data. For instance, if you see that it's possible to use Earth observation to organize the logistic for tire change in Finland, it's not completely self-evident. You see the relationship between the data and the user. And even if from time to time you have a situation where Earth observation data for solar is used for solar energy, for instance, potential estimation, In a way, the problem is that you want to go beyond this and find new applications. So the problem is always that finally the relationship between data and value for end user is really, really not self-evident. And if we compare this situation to what I said before, it's clear that we are in a situation where there is a need for design, there are heterogeneous stakeholders, there is a relationship between stakeholders that has to be created, but when it comes to the design methods, this is not with end user, this is with data users, which is not the same thing. And so they are from time to time quite far from the final users themselves. And second, it's not pooled, but it's more a form of data push, which is extraordinarily complicated to organize. Well, it's not pooled by user, but it's pushed by data provider. It means that finally you have to get methods that are inspiring and stimulating needs. So this is why the classical methods are not completely relevant in that particular case. Now, if we go deeper in this, look at the users we have. Finally, the question is, do we have the relevant user? What is useful for him? And is it a usable information for him? And we have a first class of problem where finally the user is identified. Okay? He has a problem, and it's clear that the data is a new resource to solve the problem. This is a good news. And second good news, the user is able to use the information. So this is a kind of ideal case. And in that case, it's true that you can organize co-design as a way to optimize user-friendliness in a way. But even here, immediately appears the fact that it has to be engineered, and you have to imagine a system that is good with quality, after-sales service, etc., etc. So this is probably not necessary to go only, it's not enough to go with the user, but you have probably to organize a co-design process with engineering experts, which is quite unexpected but very important. Another direction to discuss this ideal situation is to say, well, in situation, the user is identified, the usefulness is clear, but the usability is not here. You have to provide toolkits, techniques to help the user make use of the data. So usability has to be designed, and it's a quite difficult issue. Even worse, there are situations where you know the user, but finally it's not clear how the data resource is important for him. So the usefulness of data is not here. And even worse, you have situations where finally you're not sure that you are working with a relevant user, and you have to prospect for unknown user for the moment, future users. So you discover that step by step, the co-design process is designing usability, designing usefulness, or even in a way, designing the system of users. So it's extraordinarily demanding. You see, the kind of method that we require for this, we need method for that, and we need method for this. Okay, this is where co-design needs are. How to build on this? Here we have method. It's quite easy. But here we need new methods, and here we need new methods that will increase the robustness of the service, and here we need methods to design more innovative services. So this is where there is a need for co-design methods. Well, I think I'm short, so I will skip. I had an example to a very easy example. If you want to know more about it, I can keep it for questions. I skipped. And now, what can we propose as new methods? The good news is that the design theory community and all the work that have been done can help deal with this kind of problem. The first thing is there is a negative result. If you have no situation in the upper left corner, there is a very, very few chances that this situation will emerge alone, naturally. Generally speaking, this situation is quite rare and difficult to emerge by nature. We can explain this. It means that there are a lot of fixation, and in a way, if you don't organize generativity, there is a good chance that you never will go here. So in a way, it's necessary to find methods for the other cases. The positive result is that today, the progresses in design methods help us to organize this kind of process. Designing usability, designing usefulness, designing new users is possible. So it's good to know this. And the second positive result is that we can also characterize what is the final result to be get. So it's a bit abstract here, but we can explain what has to be designed exactly and quite rigorously. So it's possible to not only propose a method, but also to control the method, which is quite important if you have a kind of quality assessment. And third, well, it's also possible, based on existing knowledge, it's also possible to explain how to do this. And the first point, if we want to develop co-design method, is try to explain what is the ecosystem of actors. The first point. And now it's possible to explain how we are going to develop EU-specific co-design methods. And the first issue is, it's not enough to have co-design actions, but the first point is you have to be clear on the diagnosis. What exactly are the methods you require? So the first point is not to push and immediately implement a method, but the first point is to organize a diagnosis to be sure on what are the good methods to be set in place. So I will insist a lot on this first diagnosis process, which is the less self-evident. First, after diagnosis, finally the co-design action in itself is then becoming quite easy. So the really strong issue is the diagnosis phase. How can we organize a diagnosis phase? This I will explain directly on the E-Shape case. So E-Shape, 54 partners, 27 pilots in 7 showcases on many, many different applications area. And what we have done on E-Shape, the first thing was to try to represent who are the actors. If we think about a kind of data-driven ecosystem, how is it organized? And the first effort we have done with our colleagues is to try to represent for each pilot the kind of data ecosystem, separating the data sources and the user community and trying to understand how the data sources are related to user community. And in each case, what is interesting is that we see that the pilot is in the middle, is using data, is transforming data in a more abstract and non-contextualized information. And then this information is provided to the data user and provided in a kind of actionable way. This has to be provided in a form that is actionable by the user. And the critical point is what happened here, the relationship between the pilot and the data user. And we see in this scheme that this is, in each pilot, this relationship, this chain is already organized, and the true issue is to enrich it, finding new user, or occasionally trying to find new data to have more relevant services. So this explains how the ecosystem is organized. Based on this explanation, so we did this for each 27 pilots. It's not finished. We are going to do this. This is an ongoing process. But for instance, this is one of the pilots in this framework, one of the pilots, sorry, it's hard for me. This is one of the pilots. Here, this is our colleague from Armin. And this is an energy pilot. There is a quite complex scheme. And then, based on this scheme, it's possible to identify where are the key critical relationships. So what you see here is a situation where we can identify that there is a co-design need. And for each of these co-design needs, it's then possible to have the co-design action. So here we see the technique we have to identify the co-design needs. We have done this. We are going to do this on several pilots. And there is an interesting result. So this is a process we follow to do this for each pilot. We discuss that with them, and we have a kind of pre-diagnosis and then a conference with them, Colte, Telco, etc. What is interesting is that in the end, we have already an interesting result. The relationship between the pilot and the engaged user, thank you, 2 minutes, yeah. The relationship can be reinforced and strengthened. This is a classical representation. The relationship between the pilot and the users is unsure. It's unsure, but the users are already interested, and you want to understand where are their problems, what is usefulness for them, and what is usability for them. And in that case, you are quickly in the upper left corner. This is quite good to deal with. But we see immediately that we have also a lot of situations where the relationship here is weak. But the problem is that maybe the user you're discussing with is not exactly the good one. And here you need a co-design for dealing with unknown user. This is another type of co-design action that has to be set in place, and that occurs quite often in the pilots. Another situation is that, paradoxically, the relationship with the user is good for the moment. It's not weak, it's strong. We have good users, they are ready to use the data, etc. The situation is quite positive, so there is no co-design need, apparently. It works already. But in that situation, the problem is that it works, but it has to work at a kind of industrial level. So the kind of co-design you did here, it's not with the engaged user, it's much more with the stakeholders that are providing data and the engineering teams that are helping to support the design process. And last situation, it's possible that you have a well-organized relationship with some users, but for the future, you have to discover the future users. So you have to extend your user base. And here you need a fourth form of co-design action. So you see how the framework helped to identify 4 types of co-design actions that are quite different. And to conclude, we can, first of all, understand that there is some specificities to be addressed based on the variety of data user and the type of thing that has to be designed. Usefulness and usability have to be designed. This leads to a strong diagnosis phase that was quite unexpected, but it's now ongoing and it's really fruitful. And it's interesting that we see co-design activities that are not directly made by non-users, which is quite a discovery and interesting for the future research. More generally, it shows that eco-specific co-design requires specific competences to do all this work, and it might be interesting to discuss in the GEO, in the group of Earth observation, how to strengthen the capacity to deal with co-design engineering, we say, co-design methodologies. And second point, if we go beyond co-design methods, here we discuss only on method, but the true issue is what does it mean to organize a society of users inside the group of Earth observation? If the relationship is so complex with users, maybe it has to be institutionalized inside the group of observation. This is more for questions. Okay, thank you.